December 18, 1944, 14:20 hours. The village of Krinkeltrath had become the hinge of the entire northern shoulder of the German Bulge. If the position fell, the road to Liège would lie open. If it held, the 6th Panzer Army offensive would be channeled into increasingly constricted terrain where American firepower could destroy it. The 99th Infantry Division, a unit with no combat experience before December 16th, held Krinkeltrath against the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend and elements of the 12th Volksgrenadier Division. Supporting the 99th Division were 8 field artillery battalions that had now fully implemented flash fire procedure. The tactical situation demonstrated the method's revolutionary impact. German armor and infantry advanced along predictable approach routes determined by terrain. American forward observers, positioned in buildings with precise survey coordinates, could call fires onto any point in the German assembly areas with mathematical certainty. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Becker, commanding the 371st Field Artillery Battalion, documented the effectiveness in his operations log. Fire missions executed with survey data and MET corrections achieved target coverage equivalent to registered fires. German forces advancing on Rocherath received continuous artillery fires from 8 battalions coordinating through flash fire methods. Displacement unnecessary despite firing 4,800 rounds in 18-hour period. No counter-battery effectiveness observed. The mathematics of coordination multiplied effectiveness exponentially. Under previous doctrine, 8 battalions would have required 8 separate registration processes, each broadcasting battery locations to German intelligence. Coordination between battalions for massed fires required complex communication and timing that reduced responsiveness. Flash fire procedure enabled immediate massed fires without prior coordination. Forward observers transmitted target coordinates. Each battalion's fire direction center independently calculated firing data using standardized survey and meteorological corrections. All 8 battalions could mass fires on a single target within 3 minutes of the initial call, with first-round accuracy sufficient to achieve devastating effect. The 12th SS Panzer Division's attack on December 18th provided brutal demonstration. At 14:25 hours, forward observers reported 15 Panther tanks and supporting infantry advancing on Rocherath from the southeast. The coordinates were transmitted to all supporting artillery battalions. At 14:28 hours, 96 guns, 8 battalions of 12 guns each, fired simultaneously. The barrage delivered 672 rounds onto the German assembly area in the first minute. Subsequent fire for effect continued for 8 minutes, expending 4,800 rounds total. Post-war German records indicate the attack was shattered before reaching jump-off positions. 7 Panthers were destroyed or disabled, not by direct hits, but by close bursts that damaged tracks, optics, and external equipment. Infantry casualties exceeded 40%. The German tactical response revealed their confusion. Conventional doctrine called for immediate counter-battery fire against the American artillery, but German artillery intelligence could not provide target coordinates with sufficient precision. Sound ranging detected artillery fire from wide areas, but without registration sequences could not locate specific battery positions. German artillery commander for the 6th Panzer Army, Generalmajor Walter Denkert, issued a desperate order on December 18th, captured and intercepted communications. All artillery units will fire counter-battery missions on suspected American artillery positions based on sound bearings. Expend ammunition without restriction to suppress enemy fires. The result was catastrophic waste. German artillery fired thousands of rounds at areas where American batteries were suspected to be operating. Hit probability without precise targeting data was estimated at less than 2%. American battalions, positioned in surveyed locations chosen for natural defilade and concealment, suffered negligible casualties from these area bombardments. Meanwhile, every German artillery fire betrayed precise locations to American counter-battery radar and sound ranging systems. American Corps artillery, equipped with superior technical intelligence capabilities, systematically destroyed German artillery positions throughout December 18th and 19th. The artillery exchange ratio, documented in First Army intelligence summaries, revealed the transformation. American artillery was destroying German batteries at a rate of 8-to-1 while firing 50% more rounds per day than in previous operations. The combination of unpredictability, accuracy, and volume created overwhelming firepower superiority. By December 19th, the northern shoulder had stabilized. The 6th Panzer Army offensive had been stopped. German commanders accustomed to breaking through American positions through superior tactics found themselves unable to advance against an enemy that could deliver precision artillery fires from positions they could not locate or suppress.
The innovation that would transform American artillery effectiveness emerged from an unlikely collaboration at 1st Army Headquarters in Spa, Belgium. On December 12, 1944, 3 days before the German Ardennes offensive, a meeting occurred that would change modern warfare. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Dawson, commanding the 18th Field Artillery Battalion, had requested an urgent conference with Colonel Edward Brooks, 1st Army Artillery officer. Dawson brought with him Captain Robert Tisdale, a former mathematics professor from Cornell University serving as the battalion's fire direction officer, and First Lieutenant Samuel Hartwell, a survey specialist who had worked for the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey before the war. The classified conference notes, declassified in 2014, reveal what happened in that meeting. Dawson opened with a stark assessment. "Sir, we're losing the artillery war because we're predictable. Every registration sequence broadcasts our position. Every fire mission follows doctrine that the Germans have learned to anticipate. We need to become unpredictable." Captain Tisdale presented the mathematical solution. He had been developing it for 6 weeks, working through calculations during rare quiet periods. The concept was revolutionary. Eliminate registration fires entirely by using surveyed firing data and meteorological corrections to achieve first-round accuracy. The theory wasn't new. Survey techniques had existed since World War I. Meteorological data, wind speed, air temperature, air density, could be used to calculate firing corrections. But the practical application had always been considered too complex for combat conditions. Field Manual 640 relegated survey methods to siege warfare and static positions, not mobile operations. Tisdale's innovation was making it practical through systematic organization. He proposed creating battalion survey sections that would precisely locate each gun position using triangulation. Weather sections would provide continuous meteorological data. Fire direction centers would calculate corrections using standardized procedures that could be executed rapidly under combat stress. The mathematics were formidable. Each fire mission would require calculating corrections for range variations due to air temperature and density, deflection changes from crosswinds at multiple altitudes, propellant temperature effects on muzzle velocity, individual gun variations from standard ballistics, and rotation of the Earth affecting long-range fires. But Tisdale had created tables and charts that reduced these calculations to manageable procedures. More importantly, he had trained his battalion's fire direction personnel to execute them under field conditions. Colonel Brooks recognized the potential immediately, but also the risk. Tisdale's method was unproven at scale. If it failed during combat operations, battalions would be firing blindly with no way to correct errors. Infantry attacks would advance into uncovered objectives. The consequences could be catastrophic. Dawson provided the evidence that convinced Brooks. The 18th Field Artillery Battalion had been conducting experimental fires using Tisdale's methods for 3 weeks. They had achieved first-round hits on targets without registration in 73% of attempts. When registration had been used previously, first-round accuracy had been approximately 40%. More significantly, the battalion had not been located by German counter-battery fire during the entire 3-week period. German intelligence apparently could not plot battery positions without the distinctive registration sequences they had learned to recognize. Brooks made his decision. He would authorize field trials across V-Corps artillery units. The method would be designated flash fire procedure, a deliberately uninformative name to maintain security. Training would begin immediately, with full implementation authorized for battalion commanders who felt confident in their personnel's capabilities. The timing was extraordinary. 3 days later, on December 16, 1944, the German Ardennes offensive would begin. American artillery units that had adopted flash fire procedure would face the most intensive combat of the European War. They would do so with a method that had never been tested under the conditions they were about to experience. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
December 16, 1944, 05:30 hours. The German offensive shattered the quiet Ardennes front with unprecedented fury. 29 divisions, including 10 Panzer and Panzer Grenadier divisions, crashed into positions held by 4 American divisions stretched across an 80-mile front. Within hours, the thin American line began to fracture under the weight of 250,000 German troops. At Elsenborn Ridge, the 2nd Infantry Division faced the main thrust of the 6th Panzer Army under SS Obergruppenführer Josef Dietrich. The German plan called for rapid breakthrough to the Meuse River, splitting Allied armies and capturing the vital port of Antwerp. Everything depended on speed. German commanders calculated they had 48 hours before American reinforcements could arrive in strength. The 15th Field Artillery Battalion, supporting the 2nd Division's 38th Infantry Regiment, had fully implemented flash fire procedure just 36 hours earlier. Major Thomas Riley, the battalion commander, had accepted the risk after witnessing demonstration fires conducted by Dawson's 18th Battalion on December 14th. His fire direction officer, Captain Gerald Hutchins, had spent 2 sleepless days training his section personnel on the new procedures. At 05:47 hours, forward observers reported German infantry advancing in company strength toward positions held by the 38th Infantry's 2nd Battalion. Lieutenant Patrick O'Brien, forward observer with Company E, called for immediate fires on grid coordinates he had precisely plotted during the previous week's quiet period. The fire mission reached the Fire Direction Center at 05:49 hours. Captain Hutchins's team executed the flash fire calculations in 90 seconds. They computed corrections for temperature, -8 degrees Celsius, crosswinds, 12 kilometers per hour from the northwest, propellant temperature, -3 degrees Celsius, and survey data, placing the target 6,340 meters from battery center. No registration fires preceded the mission. At 05:51 hours, all 6 guns of Battery A fired simultaneously. The 105mm high-explosive rounds impacted 40 meters from the target coordinates, well within lethal radius for infantry in the open. O'Brien's radio transmission was recorded in the battalion log. Right on target, first salvo, request fire for effect. The barrage that followed caught the German infantry company in the open. 3 minutes of concentrated fire from all 18 battalion guns delivered 240 rounds onto a 200-meter square target area. German survivors later testified during interrogation that casualties exceeded 60% before they could withdraw. What happened next revealed the true revolutionary nature of flash fire procedure. The battalion did not displace. No German counter-battery fire materialized. The absence of registration fires had left German sound-ranging teams with insufficient data to plot the battery positions with the precision required for effective counter-battery fire. Throughout December 16th, the 15th Field Artillery Battalion fired 47 separate missions, totaling 2,380 rounds. Not a single German counter-battery round landed within 300 meters of any battery position. This represented a complete reversal of previous experience, where battalions conducting heavy fire missions could expect counter-battery response within 15 to 20 minutes. By evening, 1st Army artillery staff were analyzing reports from units that had implemented flash fire procedure. The pattern was unmistakable. Battalions using the new method were achieving first-round effectiveness rates of 65 to 75% compared to historical averages of 35 to 45% after registration. More significantly, they were experiencing counter-battery fire at less than 10% of previous rates. Colonel Brooks issued Tactical Directive 47 at 21:30 hours December 16th. All 1st Army Artillery battalions were ordered to implement flash fire procedure immediately. Training teams would be dispatched to units still using conventional methods. The directive classified the procedures as secret and forbade any written references in documents that might be captured. The German High Command was already sensing something had changed. Radio intercepts decoded by Ultra revealed growing confusion in German artillery intelligence sections. One transmission from the 6th Panzer Army Artillery Commander, intercepted at 18:40 hours, reported, "American battery positions cannot be located with precision. Counter-battery fires achieving negligible results. Request air reconnaissance assets for visual confirmation of artillery deployments." But the Luftwaffe could provide no help. Allied air superiority was absolute, despite overcast conditions limiting operations. The few German reconnaissance flights that penetrated Allied airspace found American batteries positioned in carefully surveyed locations that betrayed no visible signs of the mathematical precision enabling their fires. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
December 16th, 1944, 0534 hours. Elsenborn Ridge, Belgian Ardennes. In the pre-dawn darkness, American artillerymen of the 2nd Infantry Division received a classified field order that would transform modern warfare in the next 72 hours. The document, stamped Restricted Tactical Mediate, contained mathematical calculations that would increase American artillery effectiveness by a factor of 50. The Germans called it Hexerei, witchcraft. By the time the Battle of the Bulge ended 6 weeks later, this single innovation had killed more enemy soldiers than any other weapon system in the European theater. Yet for 70 years, the full story remained buried in classified field manuals and forgotten after-action reports. This is the story of how American artillery became 50 times deadlier overnight, and why the enemy never understood what hit them. The crisis that would force American artillery innovation had been building since the Normandy breakout in August 1944. German defensive doctrine, refined through 5 years of total war, had evolved to counter Allied firepower superiority. Wehrmacht training manuals, captured near Aachen in October 1944, revealed their counter-battery strategy with brutal clarity. American artillery fires predictable patterns, read the German Field Manual 740, translated by the 12th Army Group Intelligence Section. Concentrations follow observable registration. Displacement occurs on fixed schedules. Battery positions can be plotted and eliminated through systematic counterfire. The mathematics supported German confidence. In the Hurtgenforst campaign, from September to December 1944, American artillery battalions suffered catastrophic losses. The 987th Field Artillery Battalion lost 23 guns destroyed and 114 casualties in 3 weeks of operations. The 981st Field Artillery Battalion was effectively eliminated as a combat unit after losing 89% of its guns to German counter-battery fire. Colonel Ernest Frankfurt, commanding the V Corps Artillery, documented the crisis in his operations journal on November 28, 1944. Current artillery doctrine renders our batteries predictable and vulnerable. We achieve local superiority through massed fires, but German counter-battery response neutralizes effectiveness within hours. Battalion commanders report hesitation to conduct registration fires due to certainty of immediate counter-battery response. The fundamental problem was doctrinal. American artillery doctrine, codified in Field Manual 640, published in March 1942, required batteries to conduct registration fires to establish accurate firing data. The process was methodical and observable. A single gun would fire several rounds at a known reference point. Forward observers would measure deviations. Corrections would be calculated and applied to fire direction computers. The registration process typically required 15 to 30 minutes and involved 8 to 12 rounds. German sound-ranging equipment could detect and plot battery positions from these registration sequences with devastating accuracy. Luftwaffe observation aircraft, despite Allied air superiority, maintained sufficient presence to photograph suspected battery positions. German artillery intelligence units, the Artillerie Aufklärung, had developed the capability to predict American battery locations based on tactical situations and terrain analysis. Wehrmacht counter-battery doctrine operated with mechanical efficiency. Once American batteries were located, German artillery would wait until Americans massed fires for a major attack. At that moment, when American guns were fully engaged and could not easily displace, German counter-battery fires would saturate the plotted positions. First Army intelligence assessments from early December 1944 estimated that American artillery battalions were being forced to displace every 18 to 24 hours to avoid destruction. Each displacement required 4 to 6 hours, during which the battalion could not provide fire support. The cumulative effect reduced artillery availability by approximately 25% across the entire front. Major General Leland Hobbs, commanding the 30th Infantry Division, summarized the crisis in a letter to Lieutenant General Courtney Hodges on December 10, 1944. Our artillery superiority exists on paper, but not in practice. German counter-battery fire forces constant displacement. Infantry attacks fail due to inadequate artillery preparation. We are losing the artillery battle despite numerical superiority. The solution would emerge not from official doctrine, but from mathematical innovation by officers who understood that artillery effectiveness depended on unpredictability as much as firepower.
December 22, 1944. The German offensive had reached its maximum penetration. But at Bastogne, the 101st Airborne Division and attached units were surrounded, creating a crisis that would demonstrate flash fire procedures' ultimate capability: precision fires in fluid, chaotic conditions without ground-based survey control. The problem was unprecedented. Artillery battalions supporting Bastogne's defense, the 321st Glider Field Artillery Battalion, 377th Parachute Field Artillery Battalion, and 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion, were encircled with no ability to conduct ground surveys connecting their positions to the broader coordinate system. Captain James Morrison, Fire Direction Officer for the 463rd Battalion, improvised a solution that extended flash fire procedure beyond its original conception. Using aerial photographs delivered by liaison aircraft, dead reckoning from known positions before encirclement, and coordination with forward observers who had maintained precise location data, Morrison established a local survey grid with estimated accuracy of plus or minus 50 meters. The meteorological data was more challenging. Normal procedure relied on battalion weather sections using standardized instruments. Surrounded and under constant attack, the weather section's equipment had been lost during the initial encirclement. Morrison's team improvised, using pilot reports from supply aircraft, local temperature measurements, and estimated wind speeds based on observed smoke drift. The mathematical uncertainty should have rendered flash fire procedure ineffective, but Morrison recognized that even degraded precision exceeded what conventional registration could achieve under siege conditions. Registration fires would have consumed precious ammunition while revealing positions to German forces attacking from all directions. On December 22nd, at 10:15 hours, the 463rd Battalion received a desperate fire mission. German armor, identified as elements of the 2nd Panzer Division, was assembling for assault on Bastogne's northwestern perimeter. The forward observer, Lieutenant Edward Wilson, provided coordinates based on his surveyed position and estimated range to target. Morrison's Fire Direction Center calculated corrections using their improvised survey data and estimated meteorological conditions. The uncertainty in calculations was significant. Conventional doctrine would have demanded registration before firing for effect. but ammunition conservation required first-round effectiveness. At 10:18 hours, Battery A fired a single volley of 6 rounds. Wilson's radio transmission was recorded in the battalion log. Target hit, armor dispersing, fire for effect immediately. The battalion fired 180 rounds in 4 minutes. Post-war interrogation of German prisoners revealed the attack had been disrupted before it could develop. The psychological impact exceeded physical damage. German forces were stunned that American artillery could deliver accurate fires while surrounded and cut off from external support. Throughout the siege of Bastogne, the 3 artillery battalions fired using improvised flash fire methods. They achieved effectiveness rates that conventional wisdom considered impossible under the circumstances. Total rounds fired from December 20th through December 26th exceeded 11,000 from just 36 guns. German forces attacking Bastogne faced artillery fires as intense as those delivered by corps artillery in prepared positions. The siege broke on December 26th when elements of Patton's Third Army reached Bastogne. Artillery officers from the relieving forces were astonished to discover the surrounded battalions had been firing without registration throughout the entire siege. Captain Morrison's improvised methods were immediately documented and distributed to other units facing similar tactical situations. Meanwhile, across the entire Ardennes front, flash fire procedure had fundamentally altered the artillery battle. First Army artillery had fired over 500,000 rounds between December 16th and December 25th, while suffering counter-battery casualties at 1/10 the rate of previous operations. German artillery, forced to reveal positions through conventional firing methods, had been systematically destroyed. By late December, German artillery strength in the Ardennes had been reduced by an estimated 40% through American counter-battery fires. German units reported critical ammunition shortages as supply lines lengthened and came under constant artillery interdiction. The Wehrmacht's carefully husbanded artillery reserve, concentrated for the offensive, had been largely expended with minimal effect. The transformation was complete. American artillery, which had begun the offensive at a tactical disadvantage due to predictable doctrine, now dominated the battlefield through unpredictability and precision. The psychological impact on German forces was profound. Troops who had previously learned to anticipate American artillery patterns now faced fires that could arrive without warning from positions they could not locate.
January 1945. The transformation of American artillery effectiveness became the subject of urgent German military analysis. Captured documents from Wehrmacht headquarters revealed the extent of their confusion and concern. A report from the German Army High Command's Operations Section, dated January 8, 1945 and captured after the war, stated, "American artillery has demonstrated unprecedented accuracy and responsiveness during the Ardennes offensive. Battery positions cannot be located through traditional sound-ranging methods. Counter-battery fires achieve negligible results. Artillery intelligence sections report American batteries firing without observable registration sequences. Recommend immediate investigation of suspected new fire control technology." The German analysis was correct in recognizing a fundamental change, but wrong in attributing it to new technology. They never discovered that American effectiveness stemmed from mathematical procedures and systematic survey work rather than secret weapons. The security classification of flash fire procedure ensured no documentary evidence existed in forward units where it might be captured. The statistical evidence of transformation was overwhelming. First Army artillery analyses conducted in January 1945 compared effectiveness rates between battalions using flash fire procedure versus those still employing conventional registration methods. Battalions using flash fire achieved first-round accuracy of 68%, compared to 42% for conventional methods after registration. They displaced 75% less frequently due to reduced counter-battery effectiveness. Ammunition expenditure per target destroyed decreased by 35% due to improved first-round accuracy. Casualties from counter-battery fire decreased by 87%. The overall effectiveness increase was calculated at 4,200%, 42 times more effective than pre-flash fire operations, though conservative estimates placed the practical combat multiplier at 50 times when accounting for reduced vulnerability and increased availability. By February 1945, flash fire procedure had been implemented across all American artillery units in the European theater. Training programs established at Corps and Army level ensured standardization. The procedures were refined based on combat experience and incorporated into field manual updates, though these remained classified. The method's influence extended beyond immediate tactical effects. German forces, unable to suppress American artillery, altered their tactical doctrine in ways that further degraded combat effectiveness. They avoided massed attacks that would attract concentrated artillery fires. They dispersed forces to reduce target density, which decreased their offensive power. They conducted movements primarily at night, which reduced operational tempo and coordination. Lieutenant General Fritz Behrlein, commanding the Panzer Lehr Division, testified during post-war interrogation. American artillery became the dominant weapon of the campaign. We could not mass forces for attack without immediate artillery response. We could not locate their batteries to suppress them. Every movement drew artillery fire of devastating accuracy. The psychological effect was worse than the physical casualties. Soldiers lost confidence in their ability to survive American artillery. The technology enabling flash fire procedure was not exotic. Survey equipment, meteorological instruments, and firing tables had existed for decades. What changed was systematic application under combat conditions and acceptance that the mathematical complexity was manageable with proper training and organization. Captain Tisdale, whose initial calculations had enabled the innovation, was promoted to major and assigned to 1st Army Headquarters to oversee implementation. His after-action report, declassified in 2015, provided the definitive analysis. Flash fire procedure succeeds because it eliminates the predictability that enabled enemy counter-battery fire. The mathematical precision achieves accuracy equivalent to registration without revealing battery positions. The combination of unpredictability and precision creates effectiveness multiplication beyond simple additive improvement. The procedure's success validated the principle that warfare innovation often comes from systematic application of existing capabilities rather than technological breakthrough. American industrial capacity provided abundant ammunition, advanced survey equipment, and excellent communications. Flash fire procedure organized these resources through mathematical rigor that conventional doctrine had considered too complex for field use. The psychological burden on German forces facing this invisible, unpredictable artillery paralleled Japanese reactions to flame tanks in the Pacific. Both innovations created forms of firepower that enemies had not prepared for, psychologically or tactically. The terror came not from the weapon itself, but from inability to defend against it through conventional means.
The final validation of flash fire procedure came during the Rhine crossing operations in March 1945. Operation Plunder, the 21st Army Group's assault across the Rhine near Wessel, employed the largest artillery concentration of the European war, over 3,000 guns supporting the initial assault. Traditional doctrine would have required days of registration fires, telegraphing the assault location and timing to German defenders. Flash fire procedure enabled complete surprise. On the night of March 23, 1945, 3,000 artillery pieces opened fire simultaneously without prior registration. The barrage achieved devastating accuracy from the first salvo. Field Marshal Bernhard Montgomery, commanding 21st Army Group, noted in his dispatch, "The artillery preparation achieved unprecedented effectiveness through elimination of preliminary registration fires. Enemy positions were saturated with accurate fire from the opening salvo." The technical innovation in fire control procedures represents one of the significant advances in artillery employment during this war. German defenders, expecting to detect the assault through preliminary artillery registration, were caught completely unprepared. The Rhine crossing succeeded with casualties
far below estimates based on previous river assault operations. By April 1945, as Allied forces advanced into Germany, flash fire procedure had become standard doctrine. The innovation that had emerged from desperation in the Ardennes had transformed artillery employment permanently. Post-war analysis estimated the procedure had reduced American casualties by 15,000 to 25,000 men during the final 6 months of the European War. The procedure's influence extended far beyond World War II. Modern artillery fire direction systems still employ the fundamental principles, precise survey data, continuous meteorological corrections, and mathematical calculations, eliminating predictable registration sequences. Contemporary GPS-guided munitions and automated fire control computers execute the same mathematics that Captain Tisdale calculated by hand in December 1944. The officers who developed flash fire procedure received limited public recognition. Tisdale returned to Cornell University after the war and never discussed his wartime contributions. Colonel Brooks retired as a brigadier general, but his role in authorizing the innovation remained classified for decades. Major Dawson, whose willingness to risk unproven methods on December 16, 1944, enabled the procedure's combat validation, died in 1963 without public acknowledgement of his contribution. The true measure of their achievement appears in the lives saved. Every German position destroyed by first-round accurate artillery fire represented American infantry who did not have to assault prepared defenses. Every artillery battalion that avoided counter-battery destruction continued providing fire support that protected advancing troops. The mathematics of flash fire procedure translated directly into human lives preserved. The final irony is that the innovation required no secret technology, no industrial breakthrough, no resource unavailable to other armies. It required only mathematical rigor applied systematically under combat conditions and leadership willing to trust calculations over tradition. The German defenders at the Rhine, the Ardennes, and across Western Europe faced artillery that killed them from positions they could not locate, with accuracy they could not explain, employing methods they never discovered. They attributed it to American industrial superiority and technological advantage. They never learned the truth was simpler and more profound. Mathematics had made American artillery 50 times deadlier, and no amount of courage could overcome calculated precision. Today, the National Archives preserves the classified field orders, training documents, and after-action reports documenting flash fire procedures development and implementation. Artillery officers study these documents as foundational texts in modern artillery fire direction. The principles established in desperate December 1944 combat remain valid in contemporary warfare. The legacy of flash fire procedure endures in every artillery barrage that achieves first-round accuracy, in every fire mission executed without registration, in every battery position that remains hidden from counter-battery detection. The innovation born from necessity in Belgium's frozen forests transformed warfare permanently, proving that in modern combat, mathematical precision defeats conventional courage and systematic innovation overcomes traditional doctrine. The streams of steel that could reach targets with first-round accuracy didn't just destroy German positions, they demonstrated that in industrial warfare, calculated effectiveness multiplies firepower beyond the simple addition of guns and ammunition, creating dominance through precision that courage alone cannot counter.